Shabbat Shalom. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rabbi Jenny Greenspan from Congregation Beth-El for weekly Torah Talk here. I apologize, I'm a moment late. My computer was having a little difficulty logging on, but Shabbat Shalom and good morning. So good to see everybody. We will get started in just a moment. This week we are in Parashat Ekev, which is the third parsha of the book of Deuteronomy. If you have a copy of the Red Etz Chaim Chumash, I am on page 1037. If you'd like to download a copy from our website, it is under our Shabbat resources, and you can go and download that there. If you are using another form of Chumash, if you're using something other than the Etz Chaim Chumash, I am simply at the very first verse of the portion of Parashat Ekev. So Shabbat Shalom and good morning. My cat would like to also say Shabbat Shalom to everybody this morning. She's tapping on my leg here. So if she makes an appearance, she'll say Shabbat Shalom to everybody. Here she is. So Shabbat Shalom and good morning to everyone. Shabbat Shalom, Miles Siegel, and to Phyllis Luger and Alan Hamburger. So good to see you each week. Shabbat Shalom and good morning to my parents and to Carol Steinfeld. So good to see everybody. As I said, we are in Parashat Ekev for my Torah Talk this morning. We do have a bat mitzvah happening at 10 o'clock for Beth-El on our live stream and on our Zoom. If you'd like to join Cantor Melissa and Rabbi Dennis in the sanctuary with our bat mitzvah, I'm doing Torah Talk from my home just to keep the number of people in our building down. But we will have our live stream services from the sanctuary with the bat mitzvah for the Rappaport family. So Shabbat Shalom and good morning. Also good morning to Cheryl Toof and to Marty Lips. So good to see everybody this morning. We are, as I said, in the Parshat Ekev, the third Torah portion of the book of Deuteronomy. And it is, I want to actually start with a little bit of a story that I promise is relevant from this earlier this week. So I was walking home. I took a walk to the supermarket because I am blessed to live walkable to one of the fresh times here. And I was walking home the other day and I was on a section of the sidewalk that runs parallel to one of those man-made lakes that we have throughout Carmel that are there for rainwater to be a runoff space. And I was walking on the sidewalk next to one of these, and it seemed lovely, nice day. We've had some beautiful sunny days this week. And then I noticed there was rather a lot of, shall we call it, evidence of some animal or other. And at first, I was kind of annoyed by it because I will say I thought it was somebody had not cleaned up after a dog that they'd been walking. It's a lovely sidewalk to walk on. And I had a moment of annoyance at this anonymous stranger, some anonymous neighbor of mine, who couldn't be bothered to think about how their laziness might have impacted somebody else, even if rather minorly, in the grand scheme of my life. And then I realized there was, in fact, too much of it, and it was the wrong color. I'm not going to go any more detailed than that. That it was not, in fact, evidence of a dog. It was, in fact, likely evidence of the wild geese who like to hang out at that lake. And geese, unlike dogs, and unlike dogs with human owners, don't really care about what they leave behind for others. And so I had this moment of mild annoyance and then a moment of realizing that I, in fact, live in a complex and beautiful world that has some creatures who can and do act to better the lives of other creatures around them, and some creatures who just don't. I'm not trying to pick on geese, but they don't. They don't tend to worry so much about how their actions impact at least human beings. They may care about how it impacts other geese. I don't actually know. But as humans, we can go both ways. We have the ability to to think about how our actions impact other human beings and other creatures on the world, and we have the ability to be incredibly callous and to not pay attention to how our actions impact anyone else, and to be incredibly selfish and self-focused. So I'm going to get to our portion here. I think that this morning's portion seems to know that. And repeatedly, if you read through the entire portion, you will see many times, at least 3, that we are told to love God follow God's ways, literally walking on the same paths as God, and to follow God's commandments. And to be a champion for the orphan, the stranger, the widow, the people who usually get trampled on and ignored. So let's take a look at this very first verse of our Torah portion. If you are with me in Etz Chaim, whether digitally or physically, I'm on page 1037. If you are using another Chumash, it's the first verse of Parshat Ekev, or Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 12. V'haya ekev tishme'un et hamishpatim ha'ela ushmartem ve'asitem otam v'shamer Adonai Elohecha lecha et habrit be'et hachesed asher nishba lavotecha. And if you obey these rules and observe them carefully, Adonai your God will maintain faithfully for you the covenant that God made an oath with your fathers. That if we pay attention and do the mitzvot, God will continue to help us receive benefit. But there's actually something very interesting just in the very first three words, v'haya ekev tishme'un. That second word, which is the name of our Parsha, is actually also completely superfluous to the verse. The verse would say exactly the same thing if we just said v'haya tishme'un at mishpotai. We just skipped that word. And it was that you should be listening to these rules that God gave. But instead we have this word ekev sitting in here that says it's an emphatic, and as Rashi points out, it comes from the same shoresh, the same Hebrew word root, grammatical root, as the Hebrew name for our patriarch Jacob. Jacob, you'll remember, is named Yaakov because he came out when he was born holding onto the heel, the back of the foot, of his slightly elder twin brother. And here we have the word ekev as an emphatic of you must make sure you're listening and following God's ways. Also uses the word for heel, the back of our foot, the bottom of our foot. Rashi suggests that is important, and that's there because oftentimes we might think that while the verse is literally talking about mitzvot and God's laws, that we might think that we could trample on, use our heels to step on the commandments that we consider more minor, the ones that we might think are less important, and the ones that we might disregard and just step all over. And I think that that's poignant about how we also treat other human beings. Because how often do we find ourselves thinking about others and then still trampling on others in minor ways and major ways because we get too focused on ourselves? How often do we buy clothes without really thinking about who made them? How often do we buy groceries without thinking about who got them to the store for us and who grew them, who picked them if it's produce? We often take advantages of the privileges that we're afforded in society, and we don't always call out the systems that gave us those privileges while stepping on someone else. And sometimes we're the anonymous neighbor that didn't actually exist. We just simply don't bother to clean up after our dog, leaving it to annoy some other neighbor. So I think this Parsha, this Torah portion, is warning us against stepping on ways that we can be our best self. It is warning us about letting the calluses that build up on our heels as we walk through the world move and find their way onto our hearts. If you glance ahead to chapter 10, verse 16, the verse says to cut away the thick flesh from around our hearts. The Hebrew literally says to circumcise our hearts, to let God in, to love God, and to walk in God's ways. And one of my favorite passages from the Talmud reminds us that walking in God's ways is to care for another human being. So let us do this. Let's find a way to use our heels to help us stand rooted and to let God and humans in. And let's find our heels to use our heels to find ways to walk through creation with a sense of wonder and a sense of caring for other creatures. And let's flip Rashi's advice a little bit. And let's say that Rashi is suggesting it's not that we should watch where we step, but watch upon whom we step and do our best not to trample on another human being, on another soul. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much for joining me. Shabbat Shalom and welcome to Jim Roth, to Alex Siegel and Larry Spector, who've joined us. We all have a wonderful Shabbat. We can walk through creation, loving one another and not stepping on one another. I invite you to please at 10 o'clock, if you'd like to join our service. We will be both on the live stream and on Zoom. We are celebrating the bat mitzvah of Hannah Rappaport, whose bat mitzvah would have been back in May. She'll be reading a little bit from Parashat Behar Bechukotai and telling you her interpretations on that Torah portion. So I welcome you at that. You may watch it directly from the live stream on our Beth-El page, or if you go through our email, you can join on Zoom if you want to show your face to the Rappaport family. So Shabbat Shalom, and thank you all for joining me.